Welcome to The Traitors, a Traitors podcast. My name's Matthew and I'm a writer working in TV development, and I am a handy faithful. The Traitors features deep dives into every episode of the multi-award winning hit TV competition series The Traitors, as well as interviews with contestants from the shows. And this is season 3 of the podcast, dedicated to The Traitors Australia. If you've just listened to the episode 10 recap edition, then you'll now know the tragic fate of traitor Nigel. Yes, he was shockingly turned on by the faithful and fellow traitor Alex and banished from the game. And if you've been listening to the other episodes before that, you'll know what's coming now. Yes, I connected with Nigel in Australia to interview him all about his time on the show, and to play our podcast game, The Traitor. Let's go ahead and hear from the man himself. My super special guest for this episode of The Traitors is the last of the OG traitors to be banished, Nigel Brennan. Nigel made it all the way to episode 10 of the show before being stabbed in the back and banished pretty suddenly from the game. Nigel, how are you doing today?
Matt, I'm really well, and thank you very much for having me on. It's nice to talk to you today.
Oh, brilliant. No, it's great to have you on to the podcast to talk about your experience. Thank you so much. Does it feel strange to be answering questions on something you filmed, I guess, about a year ago? You know, are there parts you've forgotten? Is it weird to still be talking about this stuff?
No, look, it was such a experience, and I guess when I meet people who don't know that I've been on a reality TV show, and obviously I've got a fairly checkered past with some of my life experiences, and even just recently I play tennis with a group of mates in the south of Tasmania, and I was wearing my red tracksuit pants, and they're like, "They're nice." And I was like, "Yeah, I got them on a reality TV show," and they were like, "What haven't you done?" It's just like, but no, look, it was such a fun experience to be involved in.
Great.
And reality TV, people say, can be a fairly murky world, but for me, The Traitors was such a fun thing to do.
Oh, excellent. And I'm glad the famous red tracksuit is still being put to use. Now, before we go any further and I ask you all these questions I have, I'm going to introduce you to our game we play on the podcast, which is called The Traitor. Our secret mission for the rest of the interview is to try to betray one another by telling an undetected lie. You can tell me something about the show, about yourself, anything else that is a complete fabrication. However, your lie can't be a fake opinion, like saying you particularly loved another contestant when actually you secretly hated them. So we're looking for fake facts. Nigel, does this sound okay?
That sounds fabulous to me.
Okay, excellent. Our game of The Traitor begins now then. So, firstly, how did you find out about The Traitors? How did you get involved?
It was actually a friend of mine who I was working with at the university who sent me the link to, obviously, the casting, and I had been approached to do Survivor, Australia Survivor, about 12 months previous, and I couldn't do it because I'd just our second son had just been born, and actually contacted Endemol, and well, they sort of rang me and said, "Oh, look, there's obviously we know you're desperate to do the Survivor, but we've got this series 1 coming out of a new show. We can't really tell you much about it. We'd like to send you some information and see if you're interested. And if you are, then obviously, just fill out some forms for us." And looked at it and thought about it. And just from my perspective, obviously being part of a first series was going to be fun because there was no expectation. I guess, you go into another reality TV show that you've watched and studied. It's like you sort of know what you've got to do, whereas this was complete sort of clean sheet, which made it super fun.
Yeah. And it seemed, I think that came across on TV that it was something new, and you all understood. You seemed to understand that it was a game. In different versions of the Traitors across the world, it seems like it's very difficult sometimes for contestants to separate the game from personal relationships. How did you find that? How easy was it to separate the fact that it was a game from the friendships that you were making?
Well, look, from my perspective, going into it, it was just like, I was pretty hard nosed. Just like, I'm not going there to make friends. I'm going there to win money. Like that was my sole purpose. But I think when you spend, nearly 4 weeks together, because I was almost there for the entire 4 weeks of the filming, you do build relationships. But I guess at the back of my head too, it was like, this is just a game. Like, yes, there's a large sum of money on the table. But if I don't win, like, I'm not going to throw, I'm not going to have a tanty. But by that stage, I had really made some quite deep relationships with people in the game.
Yeah. And are you still in touch with people from the show?
Yeah, absolutely. Have had a couple of drinks in Melbourne, caught up with the crew. So caught up with Lewis and Dirk. Just trying to think who else was there. I've obviously caught up with Craig, spoken to Marielle, like I've kept in contact with Marielle, Claire as well. So we've still got a chat group, which we a group chat group that we that we sort of send information out to one another and that sort of stuff. So it's nice.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Now, one of the first things that I thought about when I started watching the Traitors Australia, and other people have asked me about this too, was the fact that you were potentially recognizable. What was your game plan if other people had known who you were?
That's a good question, because I don't actually know what I would have done, because when they obviously did, I guess, my backstory, and for me it was, I didn't want people to know. Well, it was more know about the work that I do around extortion response, and obviously, you've got to be at the top of your game with negotiation and persuasion and those sorts of things. So I guess if someone had have recognised me, and for my kidnapping, that wouldn't have been too bad. But I think it was Jack afterwards, after the show, was like, actually, I now remember your story. I didn't even pick you. Like, I should have recognised you. So yeah, that was certainly a concern for me going into the game, was like, I don't really want that to be known. And that's why I played such a sort of soft hand of, I just work at a university doing pastoral care, which was a great cover, which I was actually, I did up until recently work at a university in Tasmania. But yeah, I guess I would have tried to have dealt with that at the time, but I guess one of those things too with Traitors is if you tell a lie in the game and you get caught out, it's like basically your game's shot to pieces.
Yeah. And did you want to be a traitor when it started? And how did you feel when you were picked? You feel Roger touches you on the shoulder? Is that what you wanted to happen?
Absolutely. Like when they were doing my backstory as well before the show, like they said, would you like to be a traitor? It's like, of course. Like, who wouldn't want to be a traitor? Like, there's such an advantage. There's pros and cons. Obviously, it's a more stressful game because you're basically trying to hide amongst all the good people. But yeah, for sure, was like, that's absolutely an advantage, because it means every night that I'm going to get a good night's sleep. I know that I'm not going to get knocked off. You just got to be very cunning. And I think from my point of view, the four that were picked as the Traitors, Angus, Claire, Marielle and myself, were actually great choices. And we worked really well together until Marielle and I just sort of decided to basically get rid of the dead weight.
Now, you mentioned Jack a couple of minutes ago, and I have a question related to Jack. So this is a question from Lindsay. Lindsay's my best friend who co-hosts the podcast with me sometimes. She wanted me to ask everybody I interviewed this. Did you experience the death stare of Jack? And did it work? Did you feel like when Jack looked at you, he could tell whether you were a traitor?
When he raised that one eyebrow and looked at you, he's got a good poker face, but I did witness the death stare in the banishment room, which was look, that room was so intense too, and you obviously don't see all of what happens in the show. But yeah, like, when, I guess going back to your last question, when Roger tapped me on the shoulder and I knew I was a traitor, it's like, how do I react now when I take off my mask? Like, because I don't want to be obvious. I want to look cool, calm, and collected. I don't want to look too cool. But yeah, having people like I think Jack, Kate had a really good death stare as well. So there was a few people. Mark as well. Like, Mark was terrifying because he'd just sit there and stare at you. It's like, don't look at me. But then there were people in the room that I couldn't look at, like Fee. I'd just look at Fee and I'd start laughing. So it was such an intense sort of thing to be put through for those 4 weeks.
Yeah. But I think you did come across as very cool, calm, and collected, and things obviously changed right towards the end, and I'll ask you about that later. But you seem to be very much in control at the beginning of what you were doing. Did you find it quite frustrating because your fellow traitors seemed to be making some mistakes early on? Angus. Basically, anytime anyone looked at him, looked incredibly nervous, and Marielle made a mistake at one point in one of the cars. She said there were 4 traitors by accident, and was it difficult to have your fellow traitors do things that you thought, oh, you shouldn't be doing that?
Look, I think when you're in such a pressure situation, there was always the chance of slipping up. And I can remember during the show there was nights where I couldn't sleep, and I was thinking, like, did I say that, or was I thinking that to someone? Like, if I said that, my game is completely screwed. So, for 8 hours until 3 o'clock in the morning, it's just like, oh my God, I'm dead. Like, they're gonna know. And then, so yeah, look, and that was I think the thing about being a traitor was you are constantly living in this lie, and you're trying to, I think for us, trying to give information to the faithful so that they sort of run in a direction they're not looking at us, but doing it in a way so it doesn't look obvious. So yeah, look, Marielle was very lucky to get away with, there's 4 traitors. Angus, and even Claire, like, because everyone was like, oh, Claire looked like she was just carrying this burden.
Yeah.
So, and it's, I guess, when you get put under the spotlight too in that banishment room, it's pretty hard to turn the direction of that light onto somebody else.
Yeah, and it seemed like you're early on anyway. Your game plan, or a big part of your game plan, seemed to be that you were determined to keep the traitors together as far as possible. Why was that so crucial for you that the 4 of you really stick together?
I think just safety in numbers. Like, the more faithfuls we knocked off, and we had a pretty solid run there of 10 faithfuls to no traitors.
Yeah.
And it was just making our game so much easier with the 4 of us. But I guess Marielle and I sort of got to a point where we realised at some point the 4 of us were going to start cannibalising each other.
Yeah.
Because we didn't really know how the end game was going to finish up either. So it was sort of like, well, who do you really want at the end? And look, hindsight's a beautiful thing. I think after I left the game, it took me about 2 weeks of it. It was like, oh, how could have I played that better to have won? Like, and I think getting rid of Angus on that vote, where we could have actually, if Marielle and I had voted for Teresa, we would have got another faithful. And something like that could have just pivoted the game completely in our direction. But it was difficult too, as the four traitors. Like, each of us had our opinions too. Like Claire was really pushy at the start, and I was like, "You got too much power. I don't like the way you're sort of driving things here." And I think that's why Mariella and I sort of had that alignment of actually Claire seems to be trying to direct what she wants the traders to do, and I was like, "Yeah, I don't really like that.
Yeah.
We need to lose that power."
I have a question that's quite specific about one episode. This is episode 6, where you take part in the gamble, where you bet some money. There's a sort of strange edit between episodes here. So at the end of episode 5, I think it is, you and Marielle are faced with this proposition of picking 3 players who are going to take part in this gamble. And then episode 6 begins, and that choice has sort of very quickly been made. And you, Lewis, and Mark are walking down the stairs. Do you have any insight into why do we not see that discussion of you choosing the 3 of you?
I don't actually know. Look, there was some of the edits within the show that was interesting, and there was some stuff that we thought was gold that we did up in the towers, which never got shown. For instance, like when we were trying to decide on Kate or Justine to murder, the 4 of us couldn't make a decision. So I'd said, I've got the best way to do it. And the 3 of them were like, how? And I was like, we'll just do paper, rock, scissors. And Marielle and Claire were like, that's cruel. And Gussie was like, man, that's gold. Let's do this. Like, everyone's going to think that's hilarious. And that's how we made a decision. But that never got shown. So it was sort of like, that was weird. Like, because I thought that would have made great actually viewing. But like we had a whole discussion, obviously, about the gamble, and we didn't know what it was. The reason I sort of put my hand up for it was we thought it was going to be a physical challenge.
Yeah.
And we'd sort of been saying, because I'd been doing so well in the challenges, it was like, well, if it's a physical challenge and it's got something to do with money, then we'll put you forward. And look, there was a whole discussion too, like, is it obvious if one of the traitors is going to be in there? And I think even at the start of episode 6, where I think Lewis was like, well, one of the traitors could be, one of us could be a traitor. It's just like, la, 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 la. Let's not talk about that.
I have a question from Joe, and Joe is another friend of mine who's hosted some episodes of the podcast with me. And Joe wanted me to ask about Alex. He asks, did you realise Alex was going to be so cutthroat when you recruited her? And did you therefore then regret choosing Alex as a recruit?
Look, I don't regret anything in the game. Look, to be honest, I don't think Alex was as cutthroat as it was sort of made out to be on television. I think at the end of the day, it was Teresa and Kate that basically, Teresa, Kate, and Craig that actually worked out, obviously, Marielle, because of the thing that obviously she'd said that Fee had said. And I'm not sure whether that was true or not. I think Fee actually did say that to Marielle.
Yeah, I spoke to Marielle, and Marielle said that was true. She said Fee did say that. So, yeah.
Yeah. And like, that's what I mean, like such a little thing in the game, but because no one could verify, it was just like, well, that would be perfect for a trader to say that. There were things like that just changed the dynamic of the game. And with Alex, and I think Kate said this the best, said to Alex at one point, you just sit here in the banishment room and watch us burn each other and you say very little. And I guess for any sort of person that was going into like a second season, it's like they're the people in the banishment room that you've got to be really actually have an eye on. It's the quiet ones who are who say very little. But yeah, going back to what I was saying, it was Teresa, Kate, and Craig that basically worked out Marielle, and then obviously, I sort of shot myself in the foot because of my pinky promise, and I guess my morals and integrity got in the way, which you probably should never take into a reality TV show. but I think certainly after I was taken out, and then Kate being brought in as a traitor, and again, like I watched the UK series too, and it's like when someone's recruited, the faithless, I believe, should be told that there's another recruit, because it sort of makes the game tilted too much towards the traitors in a way. But look, in hindsight, I think Kate would have actually been a better pick, because everyone was suspicious of her, whereas no one was suspicious of Alex. So Kate would have been a good, I guess, bit of cannon fodder for us to push in front of the bus, and then everyone was like, "I knew she was a traitor."
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. You sort of alluded to this a little bit earlier. You said that you actually made some great friends. You got on really well with Craig. I just wanted to ask, how difficult was that to deal with? It's part of the game, but you're lying to people. How was it? Was it more difficult to betray a fellow traitor? Was it more difficult to lie to the faithfuls? What was the toughest part, really?
That's actually a good question. Look, I think in the back of my head, I always had that very clear concept of we're playing a game. Yes, I needed to deceive people as a traitor. I didn't actually lie per se, I don't think. Okay. And then, it was funny, like Craig, who I got on famously with, with similar age. And I can remember him, in the banishment room, he's like, 100% the only person I can trust that I know is faithful is Nigel. And it's like, oh, Jesus. And then after the game, he's like, I'm going to look like a complete numpty. But look, I think, like I said, it's a game. You've got to remember that at the end of the day, everyone's end goal was to win. So, of course, you're going to do things that, look, I think I played the game with a lot of integrity and a lot of morals and those sorts of things. And the way I like MK, sort of pushed him in front of the bus very gently by sort of saying that he was very nervous for a police officer and a criminal lawyer, or Matt. It was done in a very it was just done in a very slight way of not sort of showing my hand. But yeah, look, I think there were certain people like Marielle who I'd obviously made a pact with as a fellow trader, and the two of us as the last OGs is like, I'm not going to vote for you, and she's like, well, I won't vote for you either. So, and you've got to make alliances in games like that.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, but it was still an incredibly stressful, anxiety, fun, exuberant sort of experience.
Yes, I bet. Now, focusing in then on your final episode, firstly, you were like a ninja at the laser task. What was your favorite challenge? Was it this one? Was it another one?
Well, it was this one because, look, the laser tag for me was really easy because as a young, as a child, I was like a state gymnast, which a lot of people didn't know. So that was, for me, it sort of made jumping through all of those laser beams quite easy. And after a point, it was, I think Teresa even was like, everyone just run into the laser and let Nigel get through. But I think for me, the challenges were so fun. Like the swim challenge was awesome, even though it was absolutely so freezing in that water. The paintball challenge was really fun too. Like I think that's where my bond with Craig was sort of made, because he's like, mate, I can't see. It's just like, just follow my voice, and when I tell you to run and jump and dive. So yeah, and the laser, obviously, well, I was pretty chuffed with my abilities on that day, and it came back to bite me on the ass, that night in the banishment room.
Yeah. Yeah, and you said after the challenge that you can go from hero to zero very quickly. What do you think was the key element that led to your downfall? You mentioned earlier maybe it was the fact that you hadn't voted for Marielle the previous week. Do you think it was that? Was it going for the shield in the lake? What do you think was the thing that really brought you to your end?
I think it was not voting for Marielle. Yeah, I think 100% the fact that I was one of only very few people that didn't, which again in a game like the Traitors can you can, I think all the Traitors vote like sheep, as you do, because you want to be voting with the pack and not sort of stand out. So I think I voted for Gus. I don't know whether I voted for Claire or not.
I no, I don't think you did. I think it was just Angus.
Yeah, so I voted for Angus. I didn't vote for Claire and I didn't vote for Marielle. So I think, people start to put voting patterns together and it's just like, well, hang on, he's now not voted for two Traitors.
Yeah.
So whether that starts to put your head on a chopping block, which it did for me.
Yeah. I think when Claire was banished, you voted for Matt to sort of align with Craig because that's what Craig was doing.
Yes, because Craig said he couldn't vote for Claire. And it's interesting, you're in the banishment room and Craig was sitting beside me and he just looked at me and he's like, Matt. I was like, yeah, I'm going with you. Whatever you say. And obviously Craig had his reasons because both Craig and Claire have special needs children. And Craig just said, there's no way I can vote for Claire because of that reason.
Yeah, yeah. And walking into that final for you, that final banishment, did you have a sense that you were probably going home? You started with a sort of opening speech, which gave the impression you knew it was kind of now or never. How confident did you feel about surviving that?
I didn't feel confident going in, and I think Dirk said it really well in one of the earlier episodes, where you feel like the kid in the school ground that no one wants to play with or talk to. And I think that's why Teresa and I think Teresa was sort of feeling the same way, potentially, that she was on the chopping block, and we were sort of sitting at the fire, and everyone else was running around, and sorry, can we just have a private conversation? It's just like, okay, so if you're not part of the plan, you are the plan.
Yeah, yeah. And it seemed like, until then, you had never been under suspicion as far as the viewer could see. What do you think you did so well until then? What was the key to your success? You lasted almost the whole series.
I think for me, I learned some great skills as a hostage in captivity, obviously, for 460 days. And obviously getting people to like me was imperative as a hostage, so it made it harder for them to kill me. And assimilating really quickly, getting to know people, asking them, about their lives, and so that you disarm people very quickly. So everyone's like, oh, he seems really nice, and I think are less likely to even, suspect that you're a traitor.
Yeah.
And there's certain people that I got to know better than I did others. Mark, I didn't really get to know, and he was someone that really sort of terrified me because he did have such a good trader. But then, I met Kate at the start, so we'd and because she'd done photography. So I think it's about listening too. That's an imperative part about listening and being able to show people that you are interested and, that you're willing to learn about them as well.
Yeah. So, Nigel, a few final sort of overall questions then. You made it so close to the end. Was your overall feeling one of frustration or something more positive?
It was actually really positive. I think, look, I'm not going to lie, I was gutted not to win. I think getting so close to the end, getting to the final week in the top 7 was an achievement. Would have been lovely to win $250,000 for sure. But look, at the end of the day, it was, like I said earlier, it was such a fun experience to be part of. And my partner, Alana, had said, prior to me accepting, I guess, the position in the game, she said, just be very careful. You're going into a very murky world of reality TV, and how you are depicted and how you are edited is basically up to people in the back rooms. And for me, having watched the entire season, I was very lucky to have been, not the villain like Marielle was, even though Marielle was I said, the lovely woman, or someone like Matt, who was sort of edited to be maybe a little bit crazy, but maybe Matt is, or someone like Paul, who just got no airplay at all, which was so weird and Paul was such a nice, he was the senior in the game. But for me, I had such a fabulous time. It was such a unique experience. And one of the things I do sort of say, life's about experiences and you should experience everything once. And I certainly don't regret it. And in hindsight, yes, could have played the game differently, perhaps. But, at the end of the day, it was a game. And it was fun to take part in and great to meet some amazing individuals.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on the upcoming second season? So you probably know that they have sort of celebrity contestants are part of the cast, previous reality show people.
Yes,
what do you think?
Look, I think from my perspective, that was the fabulous thing about Series 1, because you were bringing this really eclectic group of individuals who, yes, had achieved amazing things in their lives, and obviously none of us were celebrities in any realm, but great at what we do individually. I think going into the second series, maybe they might be doing that to get a better ratings. I don't know. It was disappointing that the show didn't rate better. I thought the format was amazing. I hope that they change the rules a little bit so that things like if there is someone like Kate being converted right at the end, then the faithfuls know about that. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the things I always said at the end, even at the end, it shouldn't matter whether you're faithful or traitor. I thought a great spin on it would be, obviously you've got the top 3. One person obviously gets voted out of that 3, and then the last 2 people basically have to either share or steal. So, and it shows whether people are greedy or not. So if both people decide to steal, then the money goes to the third place person, because that's what you get for being greedy.
Yeah.
So I just thought that would be a much nicer way to do it, instead of, because the game is sort of slanted towards the traders, you've got an advantage. So if you can make it to the final 3 as a trader, then it doesn't matter whether you're a trader or a faithful. It comes down to, if you're the last 2 out of the 3 standing and you both decide to split the money, then great. If one decides to steal, the other just decides to split, then the person that was obviously greedy gets to take the money. But if both decide to steal, and the third horse actually becomes the winner.
Yeah, I like that idea. And there are some rules that I would like to see changed a little bit. And there's going to be a second series of the UK version as well, and they're also doing this sort of half celebrity cast in the UK. I'm not really a fan. I don't really want it to be that way, but we'll wait and see.
I watched the UK version. I thought it was actually really well done.
Yeah.
The production was great. the cast were all fabulous as well. And I think if they could mix those two together, of the Australian and the UK, of how it was done, you'd actually get a really good show.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one sort of final question for now. You actually mentioned something earlier that I wanted to ask a bit more about. You mentioned that your experiences in the past as a hostage informed your gameplay as a traitor, because you talked about how you had to think about likability. I wonder if sort of the reverse is true. Did your time in the show give you any insights into human behavior or psychology that you hadn't considered before, or that were particularly interesting?
I, I guess because I've been, as a hostage, you are thrown into such a pressure cooker of a situation, and over 460 days, you do become hyper vigilant, hyper alert. You obviously start to understand people, and I guess you start to question your humanity as well. It's like, how can someone be doing this to me, just purely for money? And yes, I understand that Somalia was an incredibly poor country, one of the poorest on the planet. So yes, I understand why they did what they did. But I think going into the show, like for me, like I said, my end goal was trying to win the $250,000. I wasn't doing it there to become Insta famous or anything like that, because I'm like a bit of a technological dinosaur. Whereas I think some people on the show might have been doing it for other reasons, like, yes, it's good to have followers and that sort of stuff. But I guess it was interesting watching, I guess just watching human nature. Like, and I look at someone like Matt, who, everyone knew he was a faithful pretty much, but it was just like, can we just get him off the game? He's doing our heads in, because, he just was sort of throwing barbs at people. So there was interesting things to sort of, I think, just watching how people react and when they're under pressure and those sorts of things. And a lot of what you don't see in the show, like obviously the edited version, was some of those banishments were so intense, and there was tears and, arguments and some pretty hostile sort of stuff that was thrown around. And I can remember, I think it was after, maybe it was after MK's banishment, the next banishment, which you don't see on the show, but I actually spoke first in the next banishment, and I just said, can we actually just lay some ground rules? Like, I came here to have a game and to have fun. I didn't come here to basically rip people's careers apart or their personalities and those sorts of things, because if that's what you guys want to do, then you can vote me out tonight, because that's... I've come here to have an enjoyable experience, and we have to remember that the Australian public's going to be watching, and, particularly someone like Chloe, who's a clairvoyant, and people like, what horse shit. And it's like, well, actually, some people do energetically have abilities, and yes, I understand some people don't believe in that. But for me, when Chloe said I'm a clairvoyant, it's just like, oh, Jesus, that makes my skin crawl. Like, you're going to be able to read energy, feel energy. And, even Chloe in the car, when I was like, who do you suspect? She's like, well, I suspect you. It's like, oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
So, yeah, look, it is a very interesting social experiment to throw 24 people into, a situation, even the cocktail party of where everyone was like, oh, we thought MK was the butler. Just things like that. And I think even for us, poor Millie, who we voted on the first night because she was a bit quiet, wasn't really talking to anyone. It's just like, well, she doesn't seem that interested. And, unfortunately, Millie was feeling really sick. No. So it's just those little things that can affect your game, and it can basically turn your game upside down in a split second.
Yeah. Now, before we conclude our game of betrayal that we've been playing. Nigel, where can we find out more about you beyond the world of the Traitors? What should we be checking out?
Look, you can obviously Google me, and you'll get millions of hits, obviously, in regards to my kidnapping story. I do have a book, which I published about a decade ago, which is called The Price of Life. So that's available overseas. Obviously, you'll be able to download that on an e-reader.
Yep.
I'm also aligned with quite a few speaking bureaus within Australia. So I speak publicly at conferences in Australia and internationally, I guess, about my trauma and I guess using my experience to help others. And then, look, I'm, as I said before, I'm a bit of a technological dinosaur, but I do have Instagram, and my handle is Nigel Brennan. I've got to be honest, since leaving the Traitors, I've sort of taken a bit of a holiday from social media because it was a fairly intense, I guess, month when the show went to air. So I've actually enjoyed just some time with my family and my two little boys.
Excellent. I'll put links to your Instagram and to your book in the show notes for the episode. Now, we've been playing a secret game. We've been playing the Traitor throughout our interview. Nigel, I have to confess, I did lie to you at some point. Have you lied to me at some point in the past hour or so?
I have lied to you.
Okay. I'm gonna begin. I'm gonna guess what you lied about. I've written a few possibilities down as you were speaking, and I'm heading towards one of them. I think your lie was that you were a state gymnast when you were young. Is that your lie?
That is my lie.
Yeah.
Well done.
I'm back on form. I've actually been doing so badly at this. So far, I have not been guessing people's lies very well at all. So,
I thought that was a good one because it was
quite impressed with myself. Any idea?
He's not a state gymnast, you fat bastard.
Not at all. I could have believed it because you were so good at that laser task.
Yeah.
Any idea what I might have lied to you about?
Mate, the only thing I can think that you had lied about is that you do this podcast with a friend.
No, that is true. I did not lie to you about anyone who's been on the podcast. No, yeah, my friend Lindsay does some episodes with me, as does Joe. No, I'm afraid that was true.
No, and that's the only thing. So you'd be great on this show.
My lie. I mean, I told you a very small lie, to be fair, and I told you it right towards the end because I hadn't thought of anything else. I lied. I was asking you about the next season of the Traitors, and I was asking about how you feel about there being celebrities on it, and then I said that they were doing the same thing in the UK. And actually, that's not true at all.
And they're not.
They're not doing that.
There you go.
So I snuck that in at the last moment to see if I could get it by you.
Yeah, it worked. Straight through to the keeper, mate. Straight past me.
Nigel, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been absolutely fantastic to talk to you. And I know that people listening will just love to hear your perspective of how it all works and how it feels. I hope you've had an okay time talking to me about it.
Oh, mate, I've had an absolute fabulous time. So thank you again for inviting me, and it's been a pleasure to talk with you and meet you.
Thank you. You too. I will talk to you soon. Take care in Tasmania. Bye bye.
All right, cheers, mate.
Hello, Trader listeners. It was such a pleasure to talk to Nigel, and he was really open to answering everything I had to ask, so I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. At this point, there will be a slight pause for the podcast because I am going on holiday for a couple of weeks. However, I have issued 8 episodes in the past week, so I reckon you'll have plenty to listen to for the time being. The final 2 episode deep dives, as well as interviews with all remaining players, will be on their way towards the end of July. If you want to send me any questions or comments, nice ones only, or a big pile of silver bars, you can get in touch on Instagram at the Trader Podcast or Twitter at the Trader Pod, or you can email me at thetraderpodcast@gmail.com. You could also do me a huge favour by subscribing or following or leaving a lovely review on whatever platform you're using to listen, particularly Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Until next time, which will be a wee bit longer than usual, stay faithful.